How does a president become a father to children he's never met? Imagine 200 children, starving, alone, digging through mud in the dead of night, their hands blistered, their cries ignored, gold poured out of the soil, but not into their pockets. They were 5, 6, 7 years old, and no one came, until one call changed everything. At exactly 11:43 that night, a phone rang, and in a city asleep, one man awoke. He didn't call a meeting, he didn't wait for a report. He stood up and said only one thing: "We move tonight." That man was Ibrahim Traoré, the president of Burkina Faso, and this is the story of what happens when a leader chooses truth over politics, children over comfort, action over silence. But beware. This is not just a rescue story, it is a war for the soul of a continent. Subscribe, not for this video, but for a vision, a new Africa. By dawn, the mind no longer echoed with the sounds of suffering. Instead, it rang with a single order: feed them, treat them, hold them. 200 children, each more fragile than the last, were gently lifted from that pit of horror into a convoy that felt like a miracle. Some had not slept in weeks. Others hadn't eaten a full meal in months. Their bodies shook, but their eyes, they dared to hope. The road back to Ouagadougou was silent, not from fear, but from something deeper, an exhaustion that even words could not hold. When the convoy arrived at the temporary shelter, dozens of doctors and nurses stood ready. Hot meals, clean water, real beds, and something these children had long forgotten: safety. A girl no older than 7 clutched the president's arm and whispered, "Please don't leave us again." He looked at her with eyes clouded by pain. "I won't," he said. "I promise, you're home now." Inside the shelter, wounds were cleaned, bandages were wrapped, names were recorded, because every child mattered. But it was not just their bodies that were broken. Their minds carried deeper scars. The counselors sat with them, not as experts, but as patient witnesses to their silence. Some spoke, most didn't. But one thing was clear: they had been invisible for too long. One boy had whip marks on his back. Another girl had infected wounds on her hands. Yet when they were handed warm rice and sweet tea, they held the cups like precious treasure. President Traoré stayed the entire day. He didn't return to his palace. He walked from bed to bed, speaking softly, wiping tears, holding hands. He wasn't just their president that day. He was something more, something rarer, a protector. Later that night, a nurse approached him. "Sir, you've done what no one dared, but they'll come for you now." He nodded, "Then let them. But they'll have to go through every one of these children first." The world had not yet heard of what happened, but in that shelter a quiet miracle had begun. Hope, once buried beneath gold dust and greed, was breathing again. And for the first time the children slept, not in fear, but in peace. It began like a gift. 2 white vans, sweets, toys, smiles. They wore badges of kindness, humanitarian logos, soft voices, foreign accents. They called themselves helpers, but what they brought was poison. The guards at the east gate, some had already been bought. 30 minutes. That's all they needed. Inside the shelter, the men moved quickly. They whispered to the children, "You're still not safe." Confused eyes looked up. "What do you mean, the man who rescued you? He's not your president." The room froze. "He owns another mine," they said. "He took you from one prison to another." They handed the children chocolates and lies. Then they turned on the cameras. "Say it," they urged. "Say you're still being used. Say the man is not who he says." And under the weight of confusion, fear, and false promises of Europe, some children obeyed. "He's using us," one boy sobbed. "He's not our president," said another. The video hit the internet like wildfire. Within hours it was everywhere. Burkina Faso president exposed. Children claimed trafficking outrage. Tweets, headlines, accusations. From New York to Paris, people shouted, "He's just another dictator, a monster hiding behind a military uniform." In the palace, President Traoré watched the screen, his hands clenched, his jaw tightened. "What is this?" he asked. Silence. Who let them in? An advisor whispered, "Some guards." "They were bribed." He stood up. "They lied to the world, but worse. They lied to my children." He turned to his team. "We will not let this stand, not now, not ever." That night, a national emergency was declared. Investigations were launched. Fake journalists hunted. Security tripled. But the damage, it had been done. On the streets, some marched in protest. Others defended him. But the nation was divided. And in the shelter, the children cried again, this time from shame. "We didn't know," one said. They said if we did what they asked, we'd go to Europe. One small girl looked at the screen and whispered, "Is he really bad?" No child should have to ask that question. No leader should have to prove their heart with evidence. But this was not just a war for territory or treasure. This was a war for truth. And in that war, lies move faster than bullets. If your truth is stolen, what do you have left? What would you do if your children were taught to fear the only man who protected them? He returned without cameras, without guards, without protocol, just him, and the silence of the room where trust had been shattered. President Traoré stood at the doorway of the shelter. The children froze. Some stared, some turned away. A few whispered he came back. But no one ran. He walked slowly, kneeled down, lower than every child in that room, and spoke. "I heard you were in pain again, so I came." He looked each one of them in the eye. "I am not angry. I do not blame you. I just want the truth." A long silence. Then a small boy stepped forward. A man said, "You're not the president. He said you took us from one gold mine to another." Traoré closed his eyes. He inhaled deeply. "And did you believe him?" The boy looked down. "We didn't know what to believe. They gave us sweets. Said the world would rescue us." Another girl added, "They promised Europe." Traoré stood up slowly. "My children," he said, "I am your president. But more than that, I am your protector. I did not come to use you. I came to save you. You are not tools. You are not slaves. You are the soul of this nation." One by one, the children began to cry, but this time not from hunger or fear, from guilt, from shame, from realization. An older boy stepped forward. "We're sorry. We thought we were doing the right thing." Traoré knelt again, placed his hand on the boy's shoulder. "I forgive you, but now we must fix the lies." That night a new plan was born, a press conference, but not with fancy lights or prepared speeches. No script, no edits, just the truth, in the children's voices. The next day, journalists, real ones, were invited, vetted, briefed, respected. Inside a modest hall at the rescue center, cameras were set up. Microphones checked, no decorations, no politics, only a message: let the children speak. The first to walk forward was 10-year-old Jonathan. He gripped the mic with both hands. His voice shook. "The night the soldiers came, I thought we were going to die. But then, this man," he pointed, he said, "You are free now. They gave us food, treated our wounds. I didn't believe it was real. Until I woke up warm." He paused. "The men who came with cameras lied to us. We were scared. We didn't know. But today I want the world to know. That man is our president. He saved us." Then came more. A girl with bandaged arms, a boy still limping. They all spoke, of pain, of rescue, of confusion, and finally of truth. The room was silent. Not even reporters dared whisper. And then, President Traoré walked to the front. He stood behind the children, let the camera take in the whole scene, then said, "I am not here to defend myself. I am here to defend them. These children were not statistics. They were slaves, and no child deserves to be buried in dust while the world lives in comfort. I do not need gold. I do not use children. My wealth is not in metal. It is in their future. He turned to the cameras. To those who created fake news, bribed guards, and brainwashed the innocent, know this: we are coming. Not with hate, but with justice. At that moment, the hall stood up, not in protocol, but in awe. Applause broke out. Children ran to him, hugging him, clutching his legs. The truth, raw, tearful, unfiltered, had spoken, and the world was listening. Within 2 hours, the video went live. Within 5, it hit headlines across continents. From Ghana to the Bronx, from London to Johannesburg, people who once doubted now believed. Human rights groups praised the speech. International leaders called in support. The smear campaign cracked. But Traoré wasn't celebrating, because for him, the fight had just begun. 3 days after the truth was broadcast, the streets of Burkina Faso changed. Where there was confusion, now there was clarity. Where there was division, now unity returned. But in the shadows, the enemies watched. And then, a letter arrived. No name, no seal, only a threat. If you speak again, the next child to disappear will be your responsibility. President Traoré read it in silence, then looked up. Let them try. And that was the moment he ignited something deeper. Operation Gold Truth, a full national campaign, to expose, to arrest, to dismantle. He summoned his cabinet, his military, his intelligence units. We've saved the children. Now we finish what we started. Across the country, drones scanned illegal mine zones. Checkpoints were activated at every border. Whispers in the markets spoke of panic among the rich. One by one, the names were gathered. Ministers, contractors, foreign investors, and then a breakthrough. His name was Roland, once a trusted partner in the illegal gold empire, now a father, and a man filled with guilt. He walked into a secret military base one night and said, "Protect me and I'll tell you everything." Within an hour, he faced Commander Idris. "Who are you, Roland?" "I know who wrote that threat letter. I know the man behind the mines. I know his face." That morning, President Traoré listened to the full confession. The mastermind, Martin Douamba, a businessman, a philanthropist, a man praised in international circles, and also the architect of child slavery. "Where is he?" Traoré asked. "He's hiding in a private estate near the border, surrounded by mercenaries." Traoré didn't blink. "We move, tonight. No noise, no mercy." That evening, a silent convoy moved across the countryside, not for rescue but for justice. The estate was large, heavily guarded, but not ready. Smoke bombs, flashlights. Orders shouted. Martin tried to burn documents. Too late. He was dragged out in chains. When he saw the soldiers, he laughed. "So the little president sent you." They said nothing. They just drove him to the capital. The next morning, the country watched. News cameras captured every step, every chain on Martin's wrists, every child at the shelter watching with wide, tearful eyes. "That's the man who lied to us," one girl whispered. The trial was swift, the evidence unstoppable. Bank transfers, signed orders, hidden contracts, Roland's testimony. The judge didn't hesitate. "You destroyed lives for profit. You used lies to bury truth. But justice remembers." Martin Douamba was sentenced to life in prison. No parole, no escape. As the gavel struck, celebrations erupted. Crowds danced. Flags waved. Social media flooded with one message: justice has won. But President Traoré wasn't done. He called for a national address. In a deep, steady voice, he spoke, "My fellow citizens, we have seen evil, we have felt betrayal, but we stood, and today truth has spoken." He pointed at the screen. Images of the rescued children appeared. They are not tools. They are not workers. They are not slaves. They are the heart of our nation, and as long as I breathe, I will protect them. The next day, the children were taken to a new place, a school, but not just any school. Maison de Lumière, the house of light, built for them, built from pain, now built for promise, uniforms, books, laughter. The boy who once collapsed in the mine now held a pencil and smiled. Traoré visited, sat beside them. A child whispered, "Do you remember what you told me?" He nodded. "I said you would live, and now you will learn, you will lead." But even then he knew it wasn't over. Because evil doesn't die easily, it hides, it waits. So Traoré took the final step. He prepared a national broadcast, to name every name, to show every document. But before he could announce it, a final warning came. Another letter, no name, just a sentence. "Stay silent, or more children will vanish." He read it, then looked up. "Allah is watching you," he whispered, and the fire in him burned brighter. Because Traoré had made a decision, no more silence, no more fear, and never again will the truth be buried under gold. The dust has settled, the court has spoken. The children sleep under roofs of safety, but this story, it is not over. Because what was rescued that night was not just 200 children. It was a nation's soul. It was a truth too long buried. It was the promise that no child would ever again be left in darkness. President Traoré did not run. He did not break under lies. He stood firm, not because it was easy, but because someone had to. He proved that leadership is not power. It is presence. It is not command. It is compassion. It is showing up when the world walks away. And the children, they are no longer victims. They are no longer minors. They are students now, builders of the very future that once forgot them, the Maison de Lumière. Their house of light stands tall as a symbol. That pain can grow into power. That truth, though slow, always returns. And to those who think Africa is still asleep, still enslaved, look again. We are not poor. We are not broken. We are not yours to pity. We are healing. We are rising. And we remember. So if you've listened this far, don't walk away the same. Tell someone. Tell your children. Tell your community that there was a night a president didn't wait, a people didn't fold, and the light stayed. If you believe in an Africa that protects its children, that tells its truth, that stands even in storms, comment New Africa. Not because it's easy, but because it's time. They say that gold glitters, but what they never tell you is how it blinds. As an African born into the soil that so many seek to exploit, this story is not just a tale of trauma or triumph. It is the mirror we avoid, the question we fail to ask, the reckoning long overdue. The rescue of 200 children from the belly of the earth is not the end. It is the beginning of a confrontation with ourselves, with our systems, and with the world that has always seen our pain as background noise to their wealth. President Ibrahim Traoré did what so many before him refused to do. He chose his people, not in speeches, not in slogans, but in action. In the dead of night, without permission from the powerful, without applause from the West, he moved. And for that alone, history should remember him. But what haunts me is not just the courage of that moment. It is the question, how did we get here? How did it become acceptable that children, our children, dig for minerals while others tweet about liberation? How did Africa, a continent so rich in promise, become a playground for plunderers and puppets? Because make no mistake, this was not just a crime against children. This was a campaign, coordinated, funded, protected. The cameras that arrived with sweets were not random. The lies whispered into ears, already trembling with fear, were not spontaneous. This was manipulation designed to bury truth beneath propaganda. And we must admit it nearly worked. We Africans have always been resilient. But resilience is not a strategy. Survival is not freedom. We have endured slavery, colonization, coups, and corruption. But endurance without accountability becomes complicity. And the real tragedy is not that these children were used. It's that they were nearly silenced. But not this time. For once, truth found a microphone. Not polished, not rehearsed, but shaking, tearful, undeniable, and the world listened. Yet even as justice claimed a name, Martin Dwamba, I wonder how many more Martins walk freely among us. How many philanthropists wear smiles by day and sign contracts of cruelty by night? How many governments shake hands with these men while children bleed into dust? We can no longer afford the luxury of naivety. We must name the game. This is not development. This is not investment. It is exploitation dressed as aid. Modern-day slavery camouflaged in logos and lanyards. What President Traoré has ignited is not just a rescue, it is a rebellion. A statement that African lives are not collateral, that our children will not be sacrificed at the altar of someone else's economy. I felt pride, yes, but I also felt shame, that it took so long, that the mine operated at all, that we needed a miracle when we should have had systems. But perhaps that is where we begin again. Maison de Lumière, the house of light, a school built not just with cement but with scars, a place where broken childhoods are stitched into new beginnings. And there in the soft rustle of uniforms and the laughter of healed hearts, I see a glimpse of what Africa could be. An Africa where presidents are protectors. An Africa where truth is not a casualty of politics. An Africa where children learn instead of labor. But this vision demands more than applause. It demands awakening. From us, from you, from every corner of this continent still sleeping under the illusion that someone else will save us. We must build institutions that cannot be bought. Borders that protect not just land but dignity. And above all, a culture that sees every child not as a worker, not as a burden, but as a soul. Because this is the line. This is where we decide, are we a continent of survivors or of architects, Traoré chose. Now we must too. Do not let this story fade into the digital abyss. Let it burn. Let it bother you. Let it shift the way you speak at your dinner tables and in your parliament halls. To every African leader watching, you are not paid to rule. You are trusted to serve, and if you cannot kneel to a child and say, I see you, then you do not deserve the title. To every citizen, justice is not just the job of courts. It is the duty of memory. Remember those names, remember those scars. And when the next Martin tries to hide behind a foundation or a foreign flag, expose him. Because truth is our weapon, and unity is our shield. This is our moment. Not just to mourn what happened, but to promise it never happens again. Africa is not a victim. Africa is a vision. And that vision begins with saying, never again in silence, never again in shame. The world may have gold, but we have something more enduring. We have each other. And that at last is enough. As a viewer, I didn't just watch that story, I lived through it. I felt the dust, the betrayal, the fire, and the fragile, trembling hope. And now I carry something I didn't expect: responsibility. Because once you see something like that, you cannot unsee it. This wasn't just a political thriller or an emotional rescue mission. It was a mirror, a confrontation, a demand. It asked us all, regardless of where we live or how we identify, to decide what kind of world we are willing to tolerate. When I first heard the words, "We move," tonight I thought it was just another dramatic line. But by the end I realized it was a manifesto, a call to action. Because truth doesn't wait. Justice doesn't ask for permission. And perhaps that's the greatest lesson: silence is complicity. Those children were not just rescued from a mine. They were rescued from our indifference, from a system that counts profit before people, from a world where those with cameras have more power than those with compassion. I watched how easily truth was twisted. A few chocolates, a foreign accent, a lie whispered at the right time, and just like that, a hero became a villain. not because it was true, but because it was easy. That's the second lesson. The battle for truth is never over. Even now, somewhere, someone is editing a video, crafting a narrative, selling a story designed to make you doubt what you know in your heart to be real. We must become vigilant, not paranoid, but principled, not cynical, but sharp, because the children at that shelter weren't just victims of slavery, they were victims of storytelling. And that hit me hard. As someone who consumes media, who scrolls and shares, I realized every click has weight. Every share has consequence. When I amplify a lie, I extend its life. When I question a truth out of laziness, I weaken its foundation. The third lesson: we all have platforms now, but not all of us use them with purpose. So I ask myself, what am I promoting? Whose voices am I raising? And would I have believed the children when they spoke? Or would I have doubted them? Because the lighting was poor and the grammar imperfect, that question is uncomfortable, but necessary. Because this isn't just a Burkina Faso problem. It's not just an African issue. It's a global failure. The economic systems that demand cheap labor, the media ecosystems that reward outrage over accuracy, the political games that trade truth for short-term gain. And yet within that failure I saw something extraordinary. A president chose to lead with presence, not posture. He didn't delegate grief, he carried it. He didn't perform empathy, he embodied it. And the children, they didn't just survive. They spoke, they forgave. They became the messengers of a movement they didn't choose, but now carry with a grace far beyond their years. Which brings me to perhaps the most vital lesson of all: children are not symbols, they are citizens. Every child saved is a future reclaimed. Every lie dismantled is a life rebalanced. And every time we choose to believe in the resilience of the human spirit, we tilt the world a little closer to justice. I think of Jonathan, the 10-year-old, who held the microphone like a sword. Of the girl who whispered to her president, "Do you remember what you told me?" "Yes, I remember. You will live." And in that promise, in that sacred vow, I found my own task, to ensure that their story doesn't become just another video in the feed, but a turning point. For schools to teach what truth costs, for governments to model what protection looks like, for us, the audience, to never again let another child dig for our comfort. We must ask where our gold comes from. We must question why our tech is cheap. We must understand who pays the price for our silence, because evil doesn't always come with guns. Sometimes it comes with contracts, with silence, with influence. But so does justice. Justice comes with memory, with organization, with a refusal to look away. And if we want a world where light triumphs, we must become the keepers of that light. So yes, I watched a story, but I also received a mission: to speak, to act, to care, and most of all to remember. Because if those children can rebuild from the ruins, so can we. As a viewer, I didn't just watch that story, I lived through it. I felt the dust, the betrayal, the fire, and the fragile, trembling hope. And now I carry something I didn't expect: responsibility. Because once you see something like that, you cannot unsee it. This wasn't just a political thriller or an emotional rescue mission. It was a mirror, a confrontation, a demand. It asked us all, regardless of where we live or how we identify, to decide what kind of world we are willing to tolerate. When I first heard the words, "We move," tonight I thought it was just another dramatic line. But by the end I realized it was a manifesto, a call to action, because truth doesn't wait. Justice doesn't ask for permission. And perhaps that's the greatest lesson: silence is complicity. Those children were not just rescued from a mine. They were rescued from our indifference, from a system that counts profit before people, from a world where those with cameras have more power than those with compassion. I watched how easily truth was twisted: a few chocolates, a foreign accent, a lie whispered at the right time. And just like that, a hero became a villain, not because it was true, but because it was easy. That's the second lesson: the battle for truth is never over. Even now, somewhere someone is editing a video, crafting a narrative, selling a story designed to make you doubt what you know in your heart to be real. We must become vigilant, not paranoid but principled, not cynical but sharp. Because the children at that shelter weren't just victims of slavery, they were victims of storytelling. And that hit me hard. As someone who consumes media, who scrolls and shares, I realized every click has weight. Every share has consequence. When I amplify a lie, I extend its life. When I question a truth out of laziness, I weaken its foundation. The third lesson: we all have platforms now, but not all of us use them with purpose. So I ask myself, what am I promoting? Whose voices am I raising? And would I have believed the children when they spoke? Or would I have doubted them because the lighting was poor and the grammar imperfect? That question is uncomfortable, but necessary, because this isn't just a Burkina Faso problem. It's not just an African issue, it's a global failure. The economic systems that demand cheap labor, the media ecosystems that reward outrage over accuracy, the political games that trade truth for short-term gain. And yet within that failure, I saw something extraordinary. A man, a president, chose to lead with presence, not posture. He didn't delegate grief, he carried it. He didn't perform empathy, he embodied it. And the children, they didn't just survive, they spoke, they forgave. They became the messengers of a movement they didn't choose, but now carry with a grace far beyond their years. Which brings me to perhaps the most vital lesson of all: children are not symbols, they are citizens. Every child saved is a future reclaimed. Every lie dismantled is a life rebalanced. And every time we choose to believe in the resilience of the human spirit, we tilt the world a little closer to justice. I think of Jonathan, the 10-year-old, who held the microphone like a sword. Of the girl who whispered to her president, "Do you remember what you told me?" "Yes, I remember, you will live." And in that promise, in that sacred vow, I found my own task: to ensure that their story doesn't become just another video in the feed, but a turning point. For schools to teach what truth costs, for governments to model what protection looks like, for us, the audience, to never again let another child dig for our comfort. We must ask where our gold comes from. We must question why our tech is cheap. We must understand who pays the price for our silence. Because evil doesn't always come with guns. Sometimes it comes with contracts, with silence, with influence. But so does justice. Justice comes with memory, with organization, with a refusal to look away. And if we want a world where light triumphs, we must become the keepers of that light. So yes, I watched a story, but I also received a mission: to speak, to act, to care, and most of all, to remember. Because if those children can rebuild from the ruins, so can we. And what now? What next? The video may end, but our responsibility begins. Because awareness without action is just consumption. I can't sit comfortably in a world where children are sold promises instead of safety, where truth can be auctioned off to the highest bidder. We need to shift from empathy to engagement, from mourning to movement. That might look like supporting local journalism that tells unfiltered truths, or backing leaders who don't bow to foreign pressure but rise for domestic dignity. It might look like holding our favorite brands accountable, asking who mines their gold, who stitches their seams, who pays the hidden cost. Because change won't come from the top down. It will rise from the stories we choose to remember, the truths we choose to defend, and the voices we refuse to silence. We must teach our children not only how to read and write, but how to recognize justice, how to resist deceit, how to speak even when shaking. Every school should show this story. Every parliament should listen to those children's voices. Every citizen must carry their testimony like a compass, not to shame, but to awaken, because justice doesn't live in courtrooms alone. It lives in choices, in courage, in communities that refuse to forget. And if Traoré could stand against an empire of lies, armed with only truth, then what excuse do we have? This story ends not in closure, but in calling. It calls each of us to ask, what will I do now? Because today, it's Burkina Faso. Tomorrow, it could be your neighborhood, your children, your future. Truth is fragile, but not if we hold it together. So let us be louder than their lies. Let us be braver than their threats. Let us be builders of the house of light, not with bricks, but with belief. If a 10-year-old can hold a microphone and shake the world, then surely we can hold the truth and carry it forward. Not because it's easy, but because it's right.